All right. Did anyone have any questions before I start the lecture? Because once I start the lecture, I'm going to put everything on mute, so I just build.
I have no questions.
Go ahead.
Actually, no, I have no questions.
Oh, you have any? Okay. All right. I got you. Okay. Anyone have any? Okay. All right. So what I'll do is I'll address certain questions I was asked and in the inbox, which is usually how I'm doing it now. So it can, police a lot of the chaos that goes on a lot of times too. And that's what I'll do. So when I get back, what I'll do for about a half an hour, those two questions are going to probably be built on for a half an hour. They deal with the connection between the Grimaldi or Bushman people or Khoikhoi tribe of South Africa, and someone asks a question about the Plateans. So I'll mute and then I'll build. So.
Okay.
All right. First question I was asked was, my father made an announcement very recently that the Bushmen or Grimaldi people was the first people on the planet Earth. These were what Caucasians like to call sub-Saharan Africans. And the reality is that when we say sub-Saharan Africans, Bushmen, what we have to do is we have to try to do our best to find a name that they call themselves as opposed to what Caucasians call them. That's one thing I noticed that we're real good at, and it's not a knock on my father at all. It's just that's just what we need to start doing, because he made that same statement in Black Book 2. He said that those of ancient Nubia, those of ancient Kemet, those of Sudan pre-dynastic, all the names that we use are Caucasian names. Just remember that. When we use the word Moor is a Caucasian name. That's what it is. Each time we use certain names, they're in someone else's language, whether it be Arabic, whether it be Greek, whether it be Hebrew. None of these names or languages define us. Nothing. It's like me. My name is either my Arabic name is Ali, or my Arabic or my ancient Kemetic name is Wepwawet. That's the name that I have. But if I make my transition and I do something great, a Caucasian comes and decides to define me. They give me a name based upon what I've done or just what they want to give me. We're constantly being defined by other people's definitions of things. So that's what we have to learn how to stop doing. Is once we learn how to stop doing that, then we can at least, get to a point where we can really be in our right state of mind. Because that's one thing I really wanted to address before I even went into the question was we have to start defining things, by who we are, by our language. You understand? And if we try to say that Arabic is our language, then we're dating ourselves. We date ourselves very hard, because if I say, just Arabic, if I say Hebrew, if I say Latin, if I say Greek, these are all dated terms for specific people or people that we encountered in a specific land. So that's the reality. And that's what we have to learn how to stop doing, and that's what we learn how to, once we stop doing that, then we can learn how to start defining ourselves by ourselves. So to go into the question, because the question was, are the Bushmen, are they connected to the Dogon? Are they connected to the Eluls? And first of all, you have to ask yourself, first define exactly who the Eluls were of ancient Tanna and ancient Atum-Re. The Eluls were what we were dealing with in ancient Sumeria as the Igigis, those that chose to stay on the ship, or Nibiru. The Eluls, if going further back, according to the story of the Egyptian mysteries, those that chose to stay on the Benu, or the Manjet. And that's what the Eluls were. It was just a name or a title for specific beings that chose not to personify physically. And that's all they are. Now, when you deal with the Dogon, what you have to realize is that the names that we have for, let's say, Mali, the Dogon is a very ancient group of people, and they're one of the few people, before we say this is a connection between the Bushmen, before we say Khoi Khoi and Dogon, let's define both before we make the connection. The Dogon tribe, which is what was asked because we were going into the Ogdad. The Dogon tribe is a very ancient group. They say that their ancient ancestors came from Sirius Star B. And if we are to be honest with ourselves, we have to realize that, number one, Sirius B, the dog star, is one of those few stars that have actually died. Stars do die because it was a sun. So it was a constellation. And it was a constellation that needed to be more elaborated on, because when you say constellation, you're also saying that it was a group, it was a place or a dimension where that was a star system that, when you say, again, star system, you have to think of other planets that have to revolve around that one star. So the next question is, what planet did they actually come from? Is there a planet? You understand? Because what we do know by ancient texts is that they are our ancient relatives, the eight Ogdads. Because we only know about the 8 Ogdads. We don't know about the 8 Ogdads that were what? Nun, Nunet, Ket, Ket, Het, He, Het, Amun, and Amunet. That was transplanted here, according to the Sumerian story, by the dolphin during the time of Tut-Nun, which is the time of Anun-Re. And they evolved from the water because they were reptilian state. But when they got here, they had to take on the molecular structure of the planet, non-ether beings, still. So that's what they were. Now, the people of the Dogon say this is who taught them what we would call the Namos, or the lawgivers. Because when you say in the New Testament, in the Bible, when it says law, it has the word Namos. You understand when it says in the beginning was the Word, and the Word was God, and the Word was God. When it says the word law, when it has the word is actually Namos. Word is law. So these were what we would call lawgivers. But it's not just knowledge. You understand? You have that's people think when they say law, you're talking about specific law or a set of laws. No, when we dealt with laws or commandments, you're dealing with a group that was what? The groups of the 613 negative confessions, the Book of the Dead by Uncle Atun, who was what we would call a hermaphrodite, male and female sex organs, the husband of Nefertiti and the father of Uncle Amun during the dynastic periods. He brought in the Book of the Dead. You understand? So when you're going back into, is there a connection, is it not, they were all relatives of each other. What has to be understood, they were all relatives of each other. And I'm just giving you a brief information piece, just to answer the question for the person that asked the question in the inbox, because I'm sure my father will elaborate a lot more than I can, because this is a question that was asked to me. But for the person that wants to do further, get a further answer, they can also ask him or whenever he gets a chance. But just to answer it from what I know and the information, everybody when you deal with the Ogbads, when you deal with the Nani Nads, when you deal pre-dynastic deities, the Pygmies, who was really called the Tides, they were all relatives of each other. When you say non-ether being, you're still saying a family group that was still within the same star system. You understand? So they were family of each other. So when you ask, okay, and just and let's now define what we would call the Bushmen were, who was the Khoikhoi tribe or the Grimaldi tribe of South Africa, okay? And these were the first women, the first African women that were the hunter, as they say, hunter-gatherers on the planet. And they first inhabited Europe, before it was even called Europe, or that land that's now called Europe or Europa, well over 30,000 years ago. Before there was any Caucasians on the planet, they inhabited that land. You understand? And they are all related to each other. All non-ether beings in some form are related to each other. I don't care if they are directly from the same star system, the same stargate, from a woman, or from Atum, from his seed that gives birth to the Nani Nads. We are all related to each other. So, yes, they are all related because all non-ether beings are related. The reality of us now is that we have to get in our minds that we're trying to get back to non-ether. You have remnants of non-ether within our genetics, from our hair, from our facial features, from our body structure. But because we have been mixed so deep with the Caucasian, that we have lost a lot of our genetic potency. So a lot of us are in between 7 and 8, in between 8 and 9. And the only way, because we're in our 4th generation right now, we have to get to a point where we have to marry amongst the strongest genes on the planet, whether they're the darkest genes, even if, because the reality is that you can be amongst the darkest gene and still manifest a light-skinned gene, or still manifest a dark-skinned gene with thin hair or gray eyes or blue eyes or green eyes. So all these, even taking that chance, the mindset is I am trying to strengthen my genetics because I know what has been done to me by our natural enemy, the Caucasian race. So just to connect all of them, connect them all to two, and then just to define more of who the Khoikhoi tribes are, or the Bushmen, or the Sands people. They are mostly identified by the women that are well endowed by their buttocks and have a certain hip size, and they're also known to be lighter in skin complexion, but still have the Africoid features. And that goes back to what people have to understand with melanin, is that when you lose the magnesium and you have to combine that with just the zinc connected with the melanin and the oxygen, the melanin is going to oxygen. You got to realize anything that rusts is not going to always rust to the same skin tone. So it doesn't mean that makes them less, so that means because they were first, that the first people were light-skinned. No, it just means that when melanin first oxidized, regardless of who it is, it oxidizes to different skin tones. So you have the Khoikhoi tribe that may not oxidize to the complete rust as would be those that would be in Meru in Sudan, from the lower part. Because remember, now there's lower and upper, whereas at one point Sudan was all of Ethiopia, all of Nubia, and all of Kemet. That was all of that land. It was only divided between Upper and Lower Africa. You understand? Even before it was Upper and Lower Africa, it was just Tarnun, it was just Africa. So that is the answer, because we're all related. Non-ether beings are all related. Africans are all related. We're disconnected now because of colonialism by our enemy, the Caucasian race, or the white man, or the Neanderthal man on the planet. Some Africans now are to the point where if you're not of the same country, then you're not family to me, because you may not be going through the same situation as I am. A Ghanaian well, it may not see a Nigerian as the same person. You're two different people. Someone of Ethiopia is not going to look up somebody of Senegal or somebody of South Africa the same way anymore. That's how confused we are as African people all across the world. So the movement needs to have a change that we're all of the same situation, bloodline-wise. We're trying to get back to who we are because, as he said before, my father said, a lot of our children are thinning out. So we're tumbling down rather than tumbling up because of the mixture with the Caucasian. Our genes, because of where we are within the fourth generation, is getting weaker and weaker. We have to strengthen our genes. And it doesn't only deal with who we mix with. That's one aspect of it. Our diet and our surroundings also changes your genetics to the strongest gene that you're trying to get back to. Because when we got here, during our time of slavery, we lost our diet. So when you lose your diet and you start to adapt to someone else's diet, someone else's atmosphere, you become a whole different person genetically. You start to crave things that genetically, going back to the original non-ether in your genetics, is not really a part of who you are. So we have to also take that into consideration. You must change your diet, and you must get back to things that are non-ether in characteristic, i.e. exercise, i.e. yoga, i.e. drum. That's just exercise. That's music, exercise, activity. If you're still dealing with a six ether paradigm, then you will completely transform into a six ether being. We are non-ether people living in a six ether mindset. That's what we're getting. That's where we are right now, and we must get out of that. The system of white supremacy has created that because we're living under their system. We think and breathe like them. That's the purpose of that was the purpose of the breath book, is to get us back into breathing as non-ether beings and thinking like non-ether beings. You understand? So our surroundings, even from us having a mate in our lives, the mate in your life, whether you're a woman or whether you're a man, you'll begin to take on those characteristics of that individual. The longer you're around that person, you begin to look like them, even if they're positive or negative. It's going to have an effect on you because you're constantly around them. You understand? And at the end of the day, you must also be self-sufficient. That individual has to feed off of your energy. If you're going to get back into certain things, you must feed off of who you are. And that person must feed off of who you are if you're in a non-ether or nine-mind state. You must get back into nine-mind state. So that's the answer to that one question. The next question was about the Ashtar Command. The Ashtar Command, as we know, is what was the nickname as the Pleiadians. And the Pleiadians were the blonde-haired, blue-eyed beings from the Aldebaran star constellation, or Pleiadians. And they were a part of what was called a galactical confederation of beings that did the work or did works of evil within the galactical confederation. And part of what they were doing was on Earth, when they gave the idea 8,400 years ago to create the Flugelrod in the mind of Yakub, the scientist with the hydrocephalic head 8,400 years ago, that was an idea that was transplanted in his brain because, of course, according to the text, according to our information, right, knowledge, is that he was given certain information because he was a mixture of not only the Denakio tribe, who was a non-ether tribe, and of the Joman or the Coneheads. You follow? So, or what we would call the Dedos. And they were mixed into his gene, but they were also connected to the Ashtar Command. So genetically, he was connected to the Ashtar Command because of a family mixture of the Denakio and Conehead. So they were able to use him for that purpose. They were also instrumental in being connected to the beings or the presidents of the United States, the Trumans, and then you have Hitler, who they gave the blonde-haired, blue-eyed, Nordic-looking beings. They gave him the idea to even create that Nordic being or that Flugelrod, which is the technical term for the Nordic beings of the caves or the caverns of Europe in the center of the earth. Those that tried to come to the surface and died off once they saw the sun, or what we would call or classify on the lower food chain as the Bennu colorless ghost. Okay? And they are responsible when they created that Flugelrod, because that was just a branch of the white race that was used for food for the reptilians. And because we are genetically connecting ourselves to a lot of times Caucasians and what they do, we get in the way of what has been going on, because we are connecting ourselves to a genetic structure, meaning white race, that was supposed to be gone off this planet many years ago, thousands of years ago, 6,000 to be exact. So the Ashtar Command is just another part of the Galactical Confederation. That they have another characteristic is that they are pasty in skin, and when you see them, they are blonde hair, blue eyes. I can't give you a confirmation of the existence because I never met them myself. But all we have is the information that has been given to us by my father, Dr.York, also known as Panda Babianon. So it's just a depiction of what we have because of what he has seen himself. So if a person doesn't want to accept the existence of these extraterrestrial beings, that is all right. That is up to the individual because that's right knowledge. Right knowledge teaches to not accept something that you can't prove. Bottom line. But this is just information so you could know what you may come across in case you do come across it. So that's just to address those two questions. So if anyone has come with questions at this point, I'm more than happy for the next 20 minutes or so to build. And if not, I'll just go into a separate subject and get back on the mute. All right, does anyone have any questions? I'm here.
Yes, I have a question. Okay, you were saying that that in order to get back to, I guess basically being the nine ether beings that we are, we really need to start connecting to each other as far as marriage is concerned.
Yes.
So what my question would be, because I have been following a lot of the Nuwapian questions and answers classes that the facility in Atlanta puts out, and I think it was Atum was saying that it wasn't Atum. Matter of fact, it's a homeboy of mine. It's a homeboy of mine that was telling me this, that it is better for us to reconnect with tribes versus simply just connecting with someone that has melanin. Like I've done a genetics test through Ancestry.com, and it's saying that my roots have been traced back to Cameroon and Congo and Ghana. Those are the strongest areas of my genetics.
Okay.
So, would it be better for me? I mean, even though I'm already married, but would it be better for me to connect with a goddess from Cameroon or Ghana, or is it fine that I just say, well, I love this black woman here. She has enough melanin for me to accept her as my wife, and I can move on and say, yeah, this is who I want to have children with and continue to build my family and better my Nagaru. Allow.
Okay. Hatep and Tawhat. It's up to the individual. plain and simple. It's up to the individual. It's up to realize that regardless of whether they're from the continent of Ghana, whether they're from the country of Ghana, whether they're from Liberia, whether they're, like I said, from South Africa, whether they're from Ethiopia, whether they're from Upper or Lower Sudan or Mali or Tanzania. They're just African countries. The one thing that's the difference between us and the African countries is that we here are very much related already to each other because we've been around each other a lot longer.
Right.
And so what we have to do, that's the reason why my father back in New Covenant class that he did back in 92 in upstate New York, he was saying we must marry amongst ourselves because he was alluding to the fact that we as he kept saying, the American Negro, the Nubians here in America, the Nubians here in America are very much connected to each other more than anybody else. When we go to Africa, that's a whole other reconnection that we have to make with those Africans. It's the same thing as if you're in a random place like in Atlanta. You have Africans in Atlanta that we can't even make a connection to in Atlanta. So if we're looking at them like, well, that's an even stronger genetic to non-ether or closer to non-ether, that may be. But they, just like us, they went through colonialism. And a lot of their genes have tumbled down as much as ours have. You have brothers here and sisters here who have stronger features and stronger hair than some of the people that are in Africa. So until we start looking at things from a family standpoint as opposed to a tribal standpoint, because tribes were created by colonialism. And once colonialism came in, because tribes are, when you say a tribe, you're saying a specific group of people as opposed to a family. Like if you got, for example, when I kept mentioning non-ether beings, the Danacules, the Ogdads, the Enads, the Tides, these are all non-ether beings. They see themselves as tribes. They saw themselves as a separation from a whole group of non-ether family. So just like the individual, it's the same thing with a sister. A sister that's Nawapian or whatever she is might be like, well, I need to get my genetics stronger. So I need to go ahead and marry someone that's from the actual continent. And which I'm not knocking that. That's a great idea within itself. But you have to realize is that our connection here has already been established. It's very much easy for us to make the connection because the struggle is already there. And the genetics there, because you got to realize Caucasians have been studying our genetics for hundreds of years since slavery. You understand? And so what they've been trying to do is find out how to breed us out. You know, you have people that were in Australia that look just like us here in America. You got to realize you have a bunch of tribes in America. The biggest thing that we have to understand is that this is a misconception. We think that the only people that were brought over here were just West Africans out of Ghana and some from Tanzania and Nigeria as slaves, and that's totally incorrect. You have people that are here, that are Sudanese, that are Ethiopian, that are Nubian, that are also West African. You have all different tribes already in America. So when you mix with somebody, like you said, you've done your ancestry and you know where you tie yourself to, you know where you are in Africa. But you got a pool of sisters and brothers here who have no idea what country they're from. See, you got the African that, as he said years ago, we came first out of Uganda. Now follow with me. We came from Uganda here first in America and settled in this land and created that Olmec culture. Okay? So that's a group of people who are from Uganda. That's one group from Uganda that came well over here, well over 100,000 years ago, and settled in here and planted different plants here other than just the rubber plant. That's one group. Then you fast forward into the 1300s, and then you're going into the Malians, from Mansa Musa to Abu Bakr. That's another group of people. That's two different separate Africans that are over here. A lot of those people are still here genetically. So when we say, okay, well, look, I think it's best that we wait till we go to Africa. We find a wife. You got Africans that are already here genetically that we don't even know about. There's a lot of us that are Africans that are here in America that we have to really find out and start digging back, because you did it all of pure Canadian. That's why I'm saying I'm not, so you can truly understand what I'm coming from. I'm not saying don't mix with someone directly from the continent, because it can be the same thing if you went to Brazil or when you went to Jamaica, because you have just as much. Yeah, you go to Jamaica, right? You can go to Brazil right now and realize that Brazil is has the second largest population of Africans all across the world. You got they always show you the light skinned what do you call it? They always show you the light skinned Brazilian, but they got the dark skin. They got most of the people that are over there are dark skinned Africans, but they never show you that until you go over there. So just as much as African, you got people that are in Brazil, the ones that are in Jamaica. These are all African people that have been spread out. So you have to realize, and not just when I say mixed with genetics, you have to also think in terms of science, not trying to make your genes begin to rise back to time. You have to realize what is being carried within the person's genetics, what type of diseases in the genetics, what type of characteristics, what type of drug use. All these things are important. So I think that the one thing that separates us from the African and us here is that, let's say, for example, a lot of the Africans have not been exposed to the amount of drug abuse that are within our genetics as well. So that's why you notice us as a being, every day you are fighting a genetic fight within yourself to go back to eating junk food, go back to smoking cigarettes, go back to smoking weed, go back to drinking, whereas a lot of the Africans over there have not had that type of fight within their own genetics. So that's an advantage that they may have. But in terms of who's who and whose gene is stronger, it really doesn't make that much of a difference now, because a lot of us over here are a mixture of so many different countries that are in Africa now. You understand what I'm saying?
Yes.
Yeah. Does that answer the question?
Yes, you did. Thank you.
Okay. No problem. Yeah, I wanted to. Does anyone have any more questions before I continue? All right. There's one thing I saw very recently, and I realized that our children is definitely our responsibility as a whole. There was something I saw, of course, we all on social media, where it was one boy and it was a girl, and they was next to each other. And the boy and the girl was in each other's face, and, I'm going to fight you, you're going to fight me. I didn't even turn on the sound. I didn't really want to hear that. But I watched it, and I saw the brother, the little boy got in the girl's face and just smacked her. And the girl, got closer, and I think he punched her. And so I'm looking at all this, and I'm saying to myself, this type of behavior is not indicative of us as a people in the long term, meaning that for a long time we wasn't doing things like that to each other. We've genetically, that's why I say any type of behavior that you're around long enough, it becomes a part of who you are. And another factor that goes into situations like that, because if we're going to teach that woman is God, then that's who she is, then we have to get into the responsibility of checking what is going on around us in terms of her being disrespected, because this is a teenager. So because she's already been slapped and punched by a boy, that's already in her mind. A lot of times that becomes internalized within herself, and she begins to see every other man that same way.
Right.
So looking at our people, that's another tumbling down effect, is that we are regressing in terms of action, and that needs to be corrected. If we don't have a system set up, because the NWAPO is supposed to have a system set up for how we govern ourselves every day. And just because a person may not be in the organization does not mean that we can't police what we see in our neighborhoods, because this is still our people. If you sit there and you watch a child, a boy that's 15, punch a girl that's 13 in the face, and you just sit back walking by, you're partially responsible for that because you're supposed to be a teacher of this information to make sure that he corrects himself. And because that is a toxic situation to watch, because that's only indicative of us as a people. Because if you watch other races, you don't see that type of behavior from their children, because they have not dealt with the spell the way we have. You understand? We've been dealing with it since slavery. It was from religion, from Islam to Christianity to Judaism is one thing, but when you are taking on the actions of a slave master that made you watch him rape your wife and your daughters and even rape you, it's all these different things that becomes factors, and then also made your daughter watch yourself get beat, made your wife watch you get beat, and then made you watch your wife get beat. He's creating a mechanism within your mind that this is how you should respond to adversity within your own family. Because if he was a man at the age of 15 years old, he would know how to calm down the situation before it gets to a point where he feels he should slap a woman in the face. He should just get to himself and be able to control his emotions and be able to back away from the situation as a man. But realize that we're being brought up in a society of a feminization where if you're a warrior, you're between these boys now who are feminized, and a warrior is that a warrior is supposed to be the protector of the woman, the provider of the woman, and the woman is the goddess and the nurturer. So if that's not being already established in the home, you're going to have chaos when you go outside in the world. So you're going to already act out what's been engineered into your brain to respond to certain types of adversity. You understand? So he's easily able to slap a woman in the face, but when it comes to dealing with his oppressor, he'll kneel down in front of that oppressor at any given time. And that's slavery, because you had slaves that would beat their wives, and he learned that from his slave master, but yet when the slave master came around, he knew when to submit. Same thing with the sisters. The sisters would yell and scream at their husbands, but yet when the slave master came around, they would jump back in the slave master's arms. These are all these situations that we're still acting out, that because it happened so many times over a 500-year span, it's becoming a part of who we are. And then what's also engineered is the TV that we're watching, because there is no rites of passage going on. There's no rules. There's no guidelines. There's no culture being set. So the culture mechanism now is television, is love and hip-hop. It's all these situations that is becoming what is raising the children. So they're becoming a carbon copy of what white supremacy has created in their paradigm. So we don't know how to break free from that, because we think what we're doing is normal. That's the foundation of what the spell of sleep is not about the spell of Kingu or Inca's creation or religion. It's when you think what you're doing is normal. When you think that beating your wife is normal. When you think that watching shows that is destroying the character of your people consistently and is defaming you and is disrespecting you as being normal and a joke. When that is normal to you, that's the spell. When you think that politicians is going to save you, you're asleep. When you don't know how to take control of and govern your own household and govern and create systems where, for example, I was going to next week have a whole class on relationships. I did it before, but I said I was going to, give like a sneak peek. Relationships are supposed to have mission statements. When you come together with somebody, you should have a mission statement set up as to what is the reason for us being together. What is our mission together? What are we trying to create? What are we trying to build? If that's not part of the structure, then what happens is you become idle as a group of people. You become idle as a couple. You become idle as a family, even if it's not just, even if you're from not even a monogamous or you're into polygyny. you become idle because there's no building, there's no nation trying to be built. That's what an organization is a group of families that are married with children, not a bunch of single people. It's not a nation, it's just a bunch of single people together. That's the reality. So we have to create that as being an importance. Family becomes importance. And if that's not being, and then within the family structure, you have a mission statement that's set up as long as you know within yourself what you're trying to do together. The setup factor is if you may want to be a teacher, she may want to write books, or she may want to be a teacher and you may want to write books, or she wants to get her own business and you assist her in that. All these things are mission statements. You know, that's called having an independent spirit. Nuwapu creates beings who have independent spirits. If you're not trying to do that, then you're not really studying the science and you're not really trying to adapt it to self and kind. So that's also something that we do have to take into account as well.
Yeah, and see, even from that perspective, because when I've been married for 4 years now, and when I met my wife, we basically met in church, and you know, I was deep into Christianity, and you know, the knowledge started coming to me maybe about a year and a half after we had been married, and it was hard to me to deny the fact that what I'm reading, what I'm taking in, it makes a lot of sense. Logically, it's hard to dispute what, you know, the knowledge that I've been gaining. Right. And so I made a hard turn away from Christianity, and it has put a slight damper on my marriage. I love my wife with all of my being, and I hold her up to the utmost respect. I treat her as a goddess that, you know, she well deserves and is qualified for. But it kind of puts the damper on it because she's still into Christianity, and it's hard for me to kind of feed her slowly, you know, what it is that I'm actually learning, and it doesn't make it any better that her father is a bishop. I mean, he holds a very high place in his church. So I know and from that standpoint, I mean, she's deeply rooted in her church, and it's to try to break that spell from her. I mean, I know it's going to be a hard task, and I've even got to the point where I've told her, you know, I'm not trying to get you to change. I don't want you to accept what I'm saying just because, hey, I'm doing it. Even if you can't get to the place where I'm at, where I can say, I understand where you're at. I understand where you are, and I know exactly how you feel. But all I'm trying to get you to do is come to a common ground with me and say, hey, I see what you're saying, but it's just not for me. I can't accept that. I can love you through it, but I can't believe, or not necessarily believe, but I can't follow what you're following, because it just totally goes against what my parents taught me. So I'm trying to get a common ground with her to just for the betterment of, mainly for us in itself, because even down to my children, man, I'm trying to show them. I mean, granted, they're still young. My oldest is 3, but I'm trying to show them the best part of me. And what I realized was Christianity wasn't bringing the best out of me. So what my in-laws and my wife feel like is like I'm going to force this on them. No, I'm not going to force them to look at what I'm looking at, but I know I have to at least teach them and let them be the writers of their own life. Don't look at my son and say, oh, he's going to automatically be a preacher. Don't throw that on him. Right. That's his choice. Right. Don't say, well, I'm speaking into prophetic. You leave that to you. Right. Let my son decide his life. And he can't decide when you're just force-feeding him one side of life. He has to know it all. She has to know it all. And this is where the argument begins. But I know that I know that the path that I'm on, I know it's the right path, and I refuse to get off of it. I can't leave it. I can't.
I hear that.
So
I hear that. I just know that at this point, you both are on two different frequency levels, and so because of that, it's going to be a constant struggle, and that's just it's just what it is, and you have to be able to deal with it from that angle. Now, if she is, my thing is, for me, I would never force anything. I wouldn't even force a book. What I would do is, whatever you're doing, just do it and let her see what you're doing. And from what she sees, she has to want to gravitate to that based upon your example. But if she's not gravitating towards it from your example, then it's going to always be it's going to be an uphill battle.
Yes, it is.
You just have to be ready for the uphill battle. Just know that those are your children as well, not just hers. Y'all sharing genetics. So whatever they want to do, you have a right to teach your children. She has a right to teach the children as well. It's just that, a lot of times in Christianity, I say religion is full of bullies. And when you don't do what they want you to do, they start trying to force things on you. And that's the thing with Nwapa, is that you don't have to force it. You either are going to be genetically connected to it or you're not. And the reason why I'm saying that is because of everything that we've done. Some people are so genetically embedded in Christism in America that they just don't want to. They just don't want to let it go, because they're allowing their foreign genetics within the fourth generation to dominate. So she has to. You got to a point where you became responsible for self. You're 33 1/3. She has to want to do that, and if she doesn't want to do that, then that's up to her. But you just have to keep being the example of what you feel is right within yourself and at least for your children. Because people sometimes at the end of the day be like, I outgrew this person, man. This ain't even working no more. And sometimes that might even be the case. Sometimes sisters are always remember this, sisters usually are going to feed off of your energy. And whatever you do and she's tripping, always say, you know what, it's because of me. So I got to get to a point where I'm about example as opposed to what I want her to do. And if you're doing something that thorough, then she'll have no choice but to follow. And if you're not, if you're kind of wishy-washy up and down, then she's going to be like, well, shoot, I don't got to follow since he's not consistent anyway. So that's something to also think about as well. That's something just to put out there,
And I have looked at it from that aspect, because we've gotten into a lot of arguments. I mean, a lot of arguments. And sometimes I can look at it, after I step back and you really analyze, what actually just happened, and I can see from my perspective, okay, well, I did get I got a little rowdy, and she gets rowdy, and then she'll get rowdier. So I do take responsibility for myself, because I look at it as the best way I can put it is how my little brother, he tells me, he said, man, you have to remember, you are the scientist. You have to look at her as your lab rat. The lab rat is only going to do what the scientist is not capable of doing. So you have to be able to look at the lab rat and say, okay, I need the lab rat to do this. So in order to do this, as a scientist, I have to put in an equation to get the result out of that lab rat. So I said, I know exactly what you're saying, and I'm even working on that, and I'm actually working on that as well, because she can get antsy, and I'll just calm down, like, okay, babe, all right, and I just give her the floor. So
the feminine, always remember, the feminine energy works off of feeling. We work off of making sense of things. With women, they work off of the feeling of it's a sensation. That's why they're emotional beings. Emotional beings work off of feelings.
Right.
And however you leave her is how she's going to more gravitate towards whatever you're doing. If you leave her in a very sedated, positive state, then she's going to be more likely to come to you more. But if you leave her, if it's constantly argumentative and it's constantly like, if it's a negative sucking energy situation, then she's going to resent your presence. So it's all about, always remember that how you lead the situation is how further she's going to gravitate to you or from you. Right. It's all about the feeling you give her in the heart chakra. If it's not if you're not stimulating that as a man, then she's going to she's going to separate further and further away.
I got you.
So it's all about word. 95% of a relationship is conversation. It's statements that's made, and it's what you put in her ear here and there. It may not always be about the doctrine. It's just about because non-reasoning is not just within a book. Non-reasoning is a schematic of how to govern yourself. Okay. So if you deal with non-reasoning on all aspects, then she'll be like, oh, okay, and it'll make sense. But if you're just dealing with it from a book standpoint, then it's no different than any other religion. Right. That's what you get to. Yeah. Yeah,
and you because you made a statement like that, something similar to that on Facebook, and I was asking you about that because I was saying that if I take Wepwawet and I carry it around like a Bible, and somebody says something, and then I'm speaking verbatim of what your father is speaking, then I'm just like I'm turning it into a religion versus being able to explain it from my own words and out of my own actions. That way, people can conjugate and say, okay, I see what this individual is saying. Right. I feel what you're saying. You're actually living what you're saying versus I'm going around throwing it like a little green Bible.
Exactly.
Okay.
You go about it in terms of the difference between parroting and applying.
Right.
Because you can, I've watched classes. I've watched the difference between those that call themselves teachers of the WAPO and those that are just lecturers. The lecturer can just give you the information where you can get it, and a lot of times the Nawabian teacher will just quote a bunch of books. But then the person is like, I can tell this from a book. I can read the book. How did you apply it to make yourself a better person?
Right.
And if you're just quoting a book, and I can tell when someone's just quoting a book, then you're not really grasping what the information is really saying. You're just regurgitating what you have to say, just so you don't sound like you're just making your own stuff up. That's what you're doing.
Okay.
So that's important too. So it's all about how you apply it and how it makes you into a better person, and then what she sees, because what she sees is who you are.
Right.
That's important, man. No problem, man. So I guess I'll set it down for this week.
Brother?
Yes.
Oh, I'm sorry. I wanted to chime in. I didn't want to cut your brothers off.
No, it's no problem. No problem.
Okay. Two things, brother. And I'm not no relationship expert, but the thing is, I would speak from my own experience. If the brother that others of mine start doing some meditation with her, do some yoga, do some things that's different from what because I'm speaking from my experience. As you start doing those kind of things, if it's right for her, her spirit and soul will come that way. Take her to a drumming session, and it will start balancing out versus you having to say so much. And see what y'all doing 5 minutes of meditation. And with the kids, the second part I wanted to say was a lot of times I get on calls and listen to people. We leave out the homeschooling part that I'm starting to see now. And this is just my opinion, and but it's just like we don't build so much on how we should build for these kids. We have everything. The conversations are always for the for the adults and the older ones, but we don't put the same emphasis on homeschooling. And I'm gravitating to that more because my daughter had a challenge where my brother was funding her going to a Montessori school, but then this year they changed the requirements as far as having shots. So I took her out because my kids are exempt from shots. But it's like, wow, it's how the universe is pushing me to where, like, you know what, homeschooling is more important. But we don't build so much on a lot of calls on the importance of it because we'll still send our kids to those schools. We still let them watch that TV and all of that programming. But as a group, we're not, I don't see us coming together as much in the homeschooling part. And even if it's not homeschooling, just socializing and educating the kids together. Like that part it's all individual, but everything else is supposed to be a group. But we're not doing that part as a group to me. And I'm not saying it's an issue or anything, but I'm just like, I just want to put that energy out there. So thank you.
I appreciate that, bro.
You're right.
Okay.
Appreciate it.
You're 100% right on that, Tyree. 100% right. I'm glad you touched on that before we even shut it down. Is homeschooling. I see a lot of people that are so-called conscious and they're still sending their kids to public school. And that's the opposite. Like, why are you still doing that? You know, and usually we'll say, well, I don't have the time. You know, I got to work. And I'm saying, okay, your children are supposed to be they're a subtotal of you, but they're supposed to be the betterment of you. They're the better you.
Right.
So if you're not training them to be better than you, then what exactly are you doing? You're just living a subpar life. Like, that's my thing. I don't tell people, you know, take them out of school. But what I do say is that it would behoove us as a people to start to at least create some type of a system where we are all almost like a communal team effort to say this group took their children out of school and are educating their children at home. Because I'm 100% on that, man. When I have my children, that is what's going to go down. That's me. You know, I wish we all did the same thing. I'm glad that Brother Tyree brought it up because a lot of it, like he said, a lot of conference calls don't even talk about it, and that was something that I want to talk about that I think just needs to just be talked about, even if it's not even a subject, but it just needs to be said, that we have to start being totally responsible for our children's education.
Right.
You know, at least if it gets to a point where, let's say if it's high school, you want to send your children, that's fine. But make sure at least the first 10 years that every information that they get is from you, so that when they get in their system, they can differentiate and put all of the lies in the grid and push that to the side and just know, okay, I'm doing this to get to a certain level, but all this is BS.
Right.
You know, so that's very important. That's one of the main things we should start doing. We can't, a lot of us can't afford an African-centered school. And I support Umar Johnson 100% of what he's trying to do because most of us aren't trying to do that. I just wish that, you know, even if, because some people can't afford it. So if we can't afford it, then we can at least have a structure where, you know, we're married, so one of us can stay home and educate our children. That's something that, needs to be talked about. It's not every conference call that you hear. That should be also talked about at least every other, or someone needs to make that very relevant. So I'm glad that Brother Tyree brought that up.
Yeah. So that, even from that standpoint, I've expressed that to my wife that I'm really not fond of them going into a public school. And like I said, with her, I have to be I have to be the scientist with her. I couldn't just come straight out and say, hey, Dr. Umar Johnson's opened up a school. I want our children to go. I had to set it up to where I could let her see, you know, I think it's better that we put our child in some type of, school that is going to help them excel. I put it to her in a way like, hey, what would you say if we can get our children in a school that's going to teach them agriculture, science, math, and even down to the point where when they graduate that they'll have their own portfolio, know how to exchange stock on the stock exchange. It's like, oh yeah, that sounds great. I would love for them to go here. Boom, I got you.
Mm-hmm.
So, I'm really not fond of public schools at all myself, but I have definitely spoke to my wife about that, and we are on the same page as far as, not putting them in public school.
Yeah, that's that's extremely important. But yeah, at least y'all are on that. That's at least one step that y'all are on. At least that impacts your children's future. Is
right.
Who they're learning from.
Right.
That's extremely important. So yeah. So if anyone didn't have anything else they wanted to say or any more questions, and we will shut it down for this week. I wanted to say heads up to everybody that did get on tonight's class, and be great to hear from you all next week as well. All right.
Most definitely.
So I'll say Hotep and
What's up, Wadu, brother?